Good morning, everyone. Amazing. So welcome to day 2 of PGConf India 2024 edition. We have an exciting agenda next, but before we get onto that, a few announcements as usual. We'll be having a group photo session before the morning tea break after the keynotes, so please be around for that. And all of your lucky draw coupons, please ensure that you deposit them at the registration desk. There's going to be a lucky draw today during the closing ceremony, which is after the lightning talks. And please note that you have to be physically present to claim your next-gen AI-enabled IoT device, the mystery gift that you're going to get, right? So it's not like you deposit and your job is done. You have to be present there physically. So I don't think I had any other things to talk about. So yeah, let's get on with the agenda for today, right? So I mentioned in my intro yesterday, right, that PostgreSQL is on a roll. It has hit a purple patch, and a lot of big companies and small alike are putting their weight behind Postgres. So we as a community might think that we are already successful. DB engine ranking, developers love Postgres on Stack Overflow and other communities. But is it enough? Are we successful? We think that this is just the beginning, and PostgreSQL needs to roll up its sleeves and be on its toes to help succeed in the future as well. To discuss upon what are the aspects that we should be looking at, we have our esteemed panelists to join us for the roundtable. So please let me invite Alicia Kuharczyk from Microsoft. Mr. Ashish Mehra from Enterprise DB. Did I hear a whistle? Jim Lozinski from AWS. Abhijit Razurkar from Google. And last but not the least, the bearded sage of Postgres, Bruce Mumjin. So welcome, panelists, and let's get started.
Good morning, everyone. So the first question is to Alicia to get started, and then kick the tires. One piece of advice for organizations looking to adopt PostgreSQL.
Yeah, so I would definitely, if I need to choose just one, I would definitely go with the knowledge and the training. Because even if you know other database systems like Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, name it, like you need to know the specific of Postgres. Of course, there are like a bunch of stuff that are common for all of the databases. Like for each database, like you need to monitor your slow queries, logs, like many, like you need to have the proper indexing, but Postgres comes with very specific features and a bit different architecture. So if you are not aware of MVCC out of vacuum, like this kind of mechanism that are in Postgres, you will run into problems like earlier or later. So definitely like the trainings, definitely read the docs, and maybe docs are not like the best source for the people that are just starting. So I would just go with the trainings, and you've got many Postgres companies that are offering like really high quality trainings, that would be. And Bruce would like to disagree, right?
I promised I'd disagree. I'm going to totally agree with her, though. I'm messing up. So I totally agree with her for two reasons. First, What I find a lot of times is that, again, she's absolutely right, that Postgres is very similar to other systems, but slightly different. And what I see a lot of people come to Postgres, they'll treat it like whatever a database they used to have. And the problem is that every time that something's different, they have to go searching for the answer, and they have to go searching for the answer. And the problem is because they haven't sort of stopped and spent maybe a week to study Postgres, they end up spending a lot of time. Every time they need something, they don't know where to go because they haven't gotten a full overview of everything. So I know it feels like a waste of time to spend 3 or 5 days learning about Postgres, but that investment of time is going to pay off many times over, because as you use Postgres going forward, you're gonna be able to find the answers to anything you need very quickly because you know exactly where to look and you're not kind of stumbling around. The other big reason I think that it's important to have a comprehensive view of Postgres is that a lot of people come to Postgres and they treat it just like their old database. They assume it has only the features of their old database. And as we all know, and I think we're going to talk about today, Postgres has a lot more than almost any other relational system. And it's going to, if you don't do an overview, it's going to take you years until you finally realize, oh, my job could be so much easier if I just use this feature and that feature. So I see that a lot, people 2 years in thinking, I need some training now. I wasted 2 years not knowing about a lot of the features and stumbling around trying to find answers. Really need to get the skill set up.
Thank you, Bruce. Ashish, you want to add anything from a...
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think so. Patience and perseverance is very important when you're trying to do something like this. As Bruce said, Postgres is different. People who come from any other database or any other system, they assume everything will work right away. Postgres has got very good now because a lot of companies have invested. A lot of data is available on different websites of companies. Earlier it was not. So you have to be patient. You have to just work through that. And once you are there, as he said, it's a great journey. It's a great journey.
Okay. Thank you for the great observations.
Maybe just to add one point,
Sure.
because some people think like if they choose manage instance, they don't need to learn at all, right? Because yes, everything will be managed for them. And this is not true, we are running also managed instance. You still need to learn. You don't need to learn about like OS, about patching, but still auto vacuum, how to do the proper indexing, how to optimize your query. This is still something that you need to learn. Otherwise, yeah, you will get into really big problems.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.
So, building upon that, right? I mean, typically if you look at conferences, right, they actually foretell the kind of topics that people are interested in, because those are topics that get selected. So even in PGConf 24 edition, we've seen a lot of talks about AI. We've seen a lot of companies mentioning about their cloud offerings. So a question to you, Abhijit. What are your thoughts about how PostgreSQL can integrate these AI features and make it more cloud friendly and cloud enabled so that it benefits all of?
Yeah, thanks, Nikhil. First of all, good morning, everyone. And I think, talk of the flavor of the conference or whatever the AI is this year and years to come will be around. And what I would like to start is I think Postgres has a wonderful capability called PG vector, and it is at the right time and enhancing at the right pace. As most of the AI use cases which require similarity search, approximate near neighbor search, and so on, definitely require vector capabilities. So some of you may ask why PG vector only, because we had something called array data type, we had something called cube data type in Postgres for a while, but they had their own limitations. So you can't really do the nearest neighbor search in array and so on. So couple of years back, it really took off the PG vector capabilities and new use cases are coming up, right? So you may have a questions around why not vector databases dedicated for this capability and why we are looking for Postgres PG vector extension. So as soon as you leave your operational data, which is stored in your Postgres, your transactions data, there are a set of challenges around latency, processing, and so on that will add on to complexity of your application. So use cases, straightforward use cases where you don't need to have a lot of millions and billions of vectors processing power. You don't need to go outside to your transactional database like Postgres. You can exactly do same thing as you are possible in those dedicated vector databases, right? So we also invested heavily as a Google, and most of us are bullish on this AI integration of Postgres. Capabilities of calling different models directly from Postgres, different large language models, and open source framework like LangChain integrating with Postgres will be a kind of key going forward. We have seen a lot of traction in use cases like contact center automation, where end-to-end flow is possible, because we know how annoyed we are when we talk to a dumb chatbot. We wait for someone to come online and solve our problems. So those are the areas where AI will make a definite impact, and all the AI applications will need some sort of context to it. So without context, AI applications make no sense. And context always comes from the transactional database, customer ID, order ID, inventory, real-time data will always come from Postgres. And that's where Postgres actually builds the gap between what is like large language models can offer, which are trained on large data, deep learning neural networks for many years of data. But you need a context and you need a real-time data to make sense out of those responses. So I think, yes, we are in a golden patch, and PG Vector is here, and I request all of you to contribute in this capability, be it IVF flat index, HNSW indexing strategies, and so on. Go ahead, try this out, build your capabilities, and contribute. Thank you.
Jim, any thoughts?
Sure. It's definitely an exciting space, but I think when we think longer term about things like vectors and other things, Postgres is going to have to adjust for the new world of Gen AI and what that means around vectors and embeddings, because it really is a new type of data, and Postgres isn't really equipped to handle that at the scale that people will get to in the future. Right now there's a lot of experimentation, and PG Vector works great for that sort of thing, but there's some inherent limitations when you talk about vectors and them being 6K in size, and the number that you could actually hold in a given table, limitations on index entry sizes for such a big data, that we have to kind of rethink how that data looks like in the future from the community standpoint. And so we might have to invent new ways to be able to index some of that data. We might have to invent new page format sizes or other things to be able to handle this when you talk about potentially having millions and potentially billions of embeddings inside of a given Postgres database. And today you could kind of do it well because everybody's still learning along the way. But when you want to think what it's going to be like in the future, 10 years from now, it probably won't be uncommon to have trillions of embeddings. And how would Postgres be able to handle that with some of the limitations that we have with the given architecture there is today? So it's going to require a bunch of patches and changes if Postgres is going to be the vector database of the future. It's potential, but the way it's architected today, it's not ready for that vision 10 years from now.
And most of the discussion been around user applications for AI. But as a database person, what would excite me more is doing some AI inside the database. For example, auto performance tuning, auto alerting. There's still a lot of maintenance involved in creating a really efficient relational database. And a lot of the problems as engineers that we come up on is we don't really know how to auto-tune some of this stuff. But AI gives us the potential that we may be able to start doing some of that and give people a better sort of out-of-the-box experience with the database.
Yeah, just to add to that, like I believe, like thanks to Postgres extensibility, like we were able, like to add the vectors really fast, right? Like much faster than other databases. Like so, once more, like the framework that was existing for years, so the extension framework, right, allowed us like to have like this vector data types much faster than our other that other database systems. And I believe, like, because, you know, vector is a hype now, right? Like, probably in 10 years, it's going to be something else. So, you know, thanks to this extensibility of Postgres, we are able, like, to have this in Postgres really, really quickly.
Thank you, Alicia. So I love the way how the questions are now going along. I mean, touching on Jim's point, Bruce, this is a question to you. So the analytical capabilities, Postgres' analytical capabilities, right? Jim touched upon it a bit, the new data formats, the new data types that we would want, right? So how can PostgreSQL support complex analysis and new data formats and data types?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to give a tutorial about that on Wednesday, so those people who had 3.5 hours with me probably know the answer. But for those who weren't there, you know, I've had a chance to sort of think about Postgres, obviously having done it for so long. And there's really two keys that have made Postgres the popularity it is today. One is open source. Nobody can really compete against Postgres in its ability to generate high quality software, right? Just as Linux and Kubernetes, all these open source projects, proprietary companies just can't develop software that quality at that speed. And that's pretty much undisputed. Right. That's obviously one strength of Postgres. The second strength of Postgres is its extendability. And Alicia's right, like when we originally had extendability, it was kind of like a pain and we didn't have a lot of use for it. But what's happened in the past 10 years is the needs of applications have changed so dramatically. Right. So now we have Internet of Things, we have documents, we have mobile, we have GIS data, we want to do data analytics, we want to do AI, right? So now we have a whole bunch of stuff that we're loading into the database that traditional relational systems weren't designed for. And because we had extendability originally designed in 1986, right, 10 years before I even started, that extendability has allowed us to move and very easily bring in those new data types. So, you know, Jim's right, like we have vector today, but then we're going to need something else, like, or at least you said that. We're going to need something else in 10 years, right? Yeah. And because Postgres was designed to be extendable, that's going to continue. In terms of analytics itself, and that was part of in the question, the one area I think that, aside from new data types and new indexing methods and stuff that we've all been familiar with, one area that I think we need to move into is a sharding architecture, an architecture that allows us to store petabytes of data that right now you really struggle with Postgres. And we've been making strides for the past 5 years. We even have a patch that hopefully will be in Postgres 17, which would allow for even greater analytics across shards. But I think we have years to go to get where you can start doing petabyte size workloads in Postgres. So I think that's another area that we need to work on.
We're getting there. Anybody want to talk about analytics?
Yeah, and you know, when you're talking about petabytes, you know, Postgres is a fantastic transactional system. When you start mixing the two together, you know, something we want to think about is that a space that Postgres should go into when there's other good open source projects in, like, say, the Apache space that are already doing those things really, really well, as compared to just working really well with them. Is there integrations that we could build to tie in with other open source projects that do those petabytes really, really well today, versus trying to make Postgres everything all in one box? Because then it just adds a lot of complexity to the code over the years, and being able to be everything all in one box makes it so this way you're never the best at that one thing, right? So yes, Postgres being able to handle better analytical workloads is making it easier for the users so they don't have to have many things. But when you're talking about petabytes, those are usually the more extreme use cases, and finding those purpose-built things that, like some of the other open source projects that's really built for that, might be a better way to go at it in the future, of just integrating really well with those, maybe foreign data wrappers or other ways to be able to load those things out of Postgres into there directly, might be a better approach for that longer term.
Great.
Excellent points.
You know, I'm aware of a couple of extensions and forks that handling like really petabytes of data pretty well. So, you know, there are some existing solutions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, PostgreSQL, you know, tends to do well eventually in terms of the functionality, you know, because, you know, we think hard and, you know, then we discuss harder. We frustrate each other out and, you know, eventually we try to come up with the best solution, right? So that's a given. But, you know, again, going back to this, you know, like cloud offerings or, you know, multi-node systems for sharding and things like that, especially given that the database is like the last bastion of your information, right? I mean, if it gets breached or compromised, you know, it's a big problem, which is very difficult to, you know, handle if that happens. So I think security is a very important consideration, right? So Jim, I wanted to ask you, you know, basically if there are like roadmaps or guidelines for the community and organizations as well around it, I think that might help. So, you know, what are your thoughts about, you know, what we can do as a community in the future regarding security?
I think as a community, the number one thing is, regarding security, is to focus on it, right? It really is, it's something that requires a lot of attention and purpose, because a lot of times when you may be thinking about designing a feature, it's fun to build a feature and you think about security last, when you really have to start thinking about security first. As Postgres is being put into more and more mission critical applications in spaces around the world, like Postgres already runs in some of the most mission critical, highly secure places in the world today. But that requires the users to be able to set it up properly, making sure that, you know, it's locked down, it's not open to the internet. Only people that could access the database are there. So the tools are there to be able to secure Postgres. It could get a lot better. But when you think about security, it's on multiple levels. Some of it's at the code level. When the most recent version, minor version of Postgres had a CVE in it, right? Being able to identify that, being able to get that out, I think over the years Postgres has to progress a little bit of the way that those CVEs are released, of being able to push out just a couple days before the binaries are available. It's something we have to think about over the next couple of years of what does that mean for everybody using Postgres when there's a small window where somebody could actually see whether or not you could exploit that, versus being able to have some sort of coordinated disclosure out to those binary providers and the service providers. Then there's adding other features inside of Postgres, whether that's adding transparent data encryption, which I think will be difficult to do inside of Postgres, given their architecture. We could have Bruce go a little deeper on that. But those are things that you could still do today when you're encrypting storage, and it checks that box for a lot of people because they want to protect if the physical media that's storing their data is lost for some reason. But there's other aspects too of just good practices. Right now, things like row-level security is there in Postgres, but it's very difficult to set up. So we want to think about when we're adding new features, especially security-related, how do we make them easier for people to implement and less difficult to make a mistake? Because if you write those policies with row-level security wrong, people might be able to see the wrong data. And that becomes a problem. So how do we make it simpler and easier as we're implementing those sort of things in order to make it so this way Postgres is more secure by default, and when you want to turn on more security, it's easy to implement and not something you need to really study and be able to get something secure by turning on those different features.
Bruce, any thoughts?
Well, obviously Postgres has a really great reputation for security. I think that comes along with that open source piece that we have. So I agree with Jim on the window idea that the CVE code kind of gets out a little bit earlier than the binary. And I've talked to the core team and security team have talked a little bit about that. He's also right that we're pretty good at looking at security early on in the process. I know commercial companies have a tendency to push the feature out and then security comes as a patch later, which is certainly never a good idea. We do support a lot of security options in Postgres. I hope we do a pretty good job of explaining them, but maybe we don't. TD is a perennial question that we get. I was sort of a champion of that a couple of years ago, and I started when I started to look at the amount of code required and the value, I started to really have doubts about whether this was a good direction to go in. And I think the community's still in that uncertainty stage of what value we're getting out of TDE beyond a checkbox, right? Some companies some commercial companies do have it because they do focus on the checkbox, EDB being one of them. But again, that's not necessarily something the community is gonna use as a criteria.
Great.
Maybe just to add a couple of lines here, the way I imagine security, or what the best line I read about security is something which can always be improved. And one of the humble asks to this community in the room is whatever small, big, whatever implementation you do on security side, please go ahead and share. It may help someone within the Postgres community. One more implementation of Postgres making more secure, one more less attack, and one more less case of data breach. So I think that's how we can continue to contribute and improve on overall Postgres security posture as well.
Yeah. Thank you. So we spoke about Postgres adoption. We looked at the AI sphere of the AI in Postgres and how do we do it. And then Bruce touched upon the analytics and security from Jib, right? Another important component, I would say, is the partnerships in Postgres ecosystem. Ashish, this is a question to you. So the Postgres is evolving, and the right direction that the partnerships should be going on. What's your thought on that?
So Postgres has, if you look at Postgres in the last couple of years, or 10 years back, it was much more in a self-help mode. If you wanted to use Postgres, you went to postgres.org and you found everything. Typically Indians, we are not used to that, right? We need an ecosystem. Most companies need an ecosystem for the product to be successful, and that was lacking. But a lot of work has happened. A lot of work has gone into this by a lot of companies out there, and even from the community, I see a lot of work being done. As Postgres is becoming in the center of the critical application, as Postgres is going into the heart of data centers, that ecosystem has to be developed. The ecosystem is going to be of companies who are going to be building products around Postgres. ISVs have to, because if you look at banks, if you look at industries, they are dependent on ISVs to build products around Postgres. Earlier, that was not the case. Now that's happening. That's now the center of most of the organization that they are building. And Postgres has made it easier for them. Earlier it was difficult, but now it's becoming easier for them. At the same time, partners are very important because they are the last mile for governments, for institutions to deploy it. So that requires a lot of work to be done at the partner level, at the local level, by a lot of companies who are sponsors here. They do a lot of work in enabling these partners to do that. And finally, the most important thing is that completes the ecosystem is the people, right? I would love to implement Postgres, but if I don't have the people, how do I do it? Who's going to maintain it for me, right? And that's where most of the people struggle. If you look at one of the hiring sites today or LinkedIn, there's a huge demand for Postgres. There's a lot of work that's happening in the training side. There's a lot of work that's happening in the certification side. But the way Postgres is developing, the way Postgres is moving towards mission critical, there's a lot more demand. So that's one area that we all, as members of the community, need to look at, how we can make it more accessible to people. Because as somebody said earlier, people compare. When they're moving from whatever legacy RDBMS to Postgres, they look at not only the product, but they also look at other technologies that work on it. I use XYZ for monitoring for my other RDBMS. Do you have something similar in Postgres? I've got these reporting systems that work on my other RDBMS. Will they work out of the box on Postgres? Because just ripping apart your current RDBMS will not solve the problem. A lot of people have to change the whole ecosystem, right? And that has to be a lot more easier if Postgres has to continue growing the way it has to.
Awesome. Great insight. So, the essence of the whole point is the last mile delivery / last mile distribution, right? So, what are your thoughts on
So I believe as Postgres becomes more and more popular, there is more companies that would like to contribute to Postgres, like not only hyperscaler, like we've got like really, we are growing the teams of the contributors, but also like other companies, as you just said, right? Like they really looking for a way like to learn, like to offer also the trainings, and there is like new startups. There is like a lot of new startups, I would say, like that that are like Postgres based, offering the products that are Postgres based. So I believe like there's gonna be much more company in the future that will contribute and do the partnership with the community. And thank you also for the PGConf, the organizers, right? Because this is like huge contribution also to the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, a lot of, having started really where companies just ignored us for the first, 10 years or so. The companies, that I've always used that last mile of service idea, that when people buy commercial databases, proprietary databases, they're used to an entire ecosystem that comes with it. And unfortunately, that ecosystem comes from one company. And that's where a lot of the abuse happens and a lot of the disenchantment people have with the proprietary databases. And that disenchantment, frankly, is driving people to Postgres like crazy, right? So we're not going to complain about it too much, right? But what's really amazing, and you can see it just in the vendor run across here, right? They're all giving that last mile of service, whether it's the cloud providers like these two, or Percona, or Fujitsu, or EDB. They're all providing that last, and I'm sure I'm missing some, I apologize. They're all providing that last mile of service. And for us, that's empowering because we can have companies, new companies that form in India just to service Indian customers, right. Okay? And the same thing in Japan, and the same thing in Brazil, and the same thing across the world. So we see it as an enablement of people to be involved. All of a sudden, you can continue using Postgres, and you can move from one support to another support company, and you don't have that lock-in problem, and the potential for abuse is much lower because you have that flexibility. And some people have complained about, oh, well, this big company is using Postgres and they're not contributing, or this cloud provider is using Postgres, they're not contributing. But I tell people, I said, hey, first, don't complain, because they're bringing the Postgres name out. When Amazon announced Postgres for RDS, that was a huge push for us. People are like, oh, wow, that must be something big, right? And the same thing with Microsoft has been touting us for years, right? And now there's an Oracle Postgres, right? So Oracle's going to be touting us coming down. I know it sounds crazy, but it's going to come, right? Because what happens is that people realize that yes, they can take the software and they can run with it and not do anything with the community. And some people do that, no question. But in almost, I would say 80, 90% of the cases, the people come back because they realize there's something here, there's an energy, there's an innovation that if they take the Postgres code and just leave, they don't get. So they're always kind of gravitated back to that. And then they realize the value of contributing, and that's how you get so many sponsors, so many people, so many contributors to the project, because we don't force them to be involved, but we A, don't complain, and B, we try and be as welcoming and show the value to them. And they definitely see it, and it's incredibly exciting to have so many of those partners with us.
Just the final thought, because you mentioned the name, right? So as Postgres become more and more popular, my big hope is that more and more people will finally learn to pronounce the name correctly.
But I think part of it too is thinking about Postgres as a community. Even the premise of the question of saying partners, right? That's a very commercial type of term, right? Where I see all the companies that are involved in Postgres as just members of the community, right? You're not paying a partner's fee to a commercial entity to be able to on their website, right? If you provide Postgres services, you could end up on the PostgreSQL website just by going there. And you could get a much deeper understanding of the code and what could be offered there, because you could go look at the code, you could interact with hackers, you could see the roadmap. If you're in a commercial engine setting, you have to be able to get that from the product managers, and under NDA, you might be able to share it with our customers. It's a completely different dynamic with Postgres, with the open source development. So I don't really see anybody as partners. I see them as members of the community, and the companies as part of that, of just encouraging that through the community process.
Any comment?
No. First of all, I think Bruce missed the Google Cloud's contribution in Postgres, but that's given me opportunity.
I'm kind of waiting for you guys, okay? We're patient.
Yeah, so I think the point is the more companies are promoting Postgres, whatever form it is, I think that always helps the entire community and entire Postgres I know we are a very vibrant community across the globe. I have seen different communities and they are contributing well. So it is nothing to like worry about someone is doing commercial sides of it or exploring it. In the end, it will definitely help overall as a Postgres, as a product, as a community. And that's, I think, I want to thanks for this organizing committee also for giving us opportunity to discuss these important issues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And now to finally say, future is great, future is ours. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.